the SACP, giving us their response to this Government of National Unity cabinet announced yesterday. Let's listen in.
Yes, indeed. Just joined by our Deputy National Chairperson, Comrade Thulas Messi. Our statement reads as follows. The South African Communist Party Central Committee convened its regular plenary session from Friday to Sunday, 28th to 30th of June 2024 in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. This was our first plenary session of the Central Committee since the May 2024 elections. The plenary offered the Central Committee a strategic moment to take a significant step forward in comprehensively evaluating the May 2024 elections within the broader context of a 30-year review of our democratic dispensation. Our immediate aim is to consolidate a way forward towards configuring our society on a revolutionary basis, drawing lessons from the election's outcome. Our evaluation is not an event, but a thorough, deep-going process. By the end of 2024, the SACP will hold a special National Congress. This will be preceded by an extensive consultations within our structures and members and other working class and left organizations. Our approach is not limited to immediate or short-term actions, but encompasses medium to long-term strategies and tactical tasks, including those that will be presented to, considered and finalized by our 16th National Congress in mid-2027. On the experience and lessons from the May 2024 elections, these elections took place amid a myriad of interacting national and international contradictions. Dominant sections of capital, both domestic and foreign controlled, actively entered the political terrain with the goal of removing the ANC from power by uniting right-wing parties into a single force through a pact or charter, and by propping up this and other popcorn parties to form part of the imperialist-backed anti-ANC regime change agenda. For instance, towards our 2024 elections, both the so-called Democrats and Republicans in the United States of America endorsed a bill in their House of Representatives through their Foreign Affairs Committee against what I quote, the ANC-led South African government, close quote. South Africa's progressive international relations and cooperation and solidarity policy, especially but not limited to the ANC-led government support for the Palestinian people against the brutal genocide by the apartheid Israeli settler state, and deepening participation in the growing BRICS Plus community of countries, and refusal to toe the NATO line in the NATO-provoked imperialist war in Ukraine are among the issues that have eked the United States imperialist bipartisan aggressors against, once again, the ANC-led South African government. Earlier in June 2023, the European Solidarity Center and the right-wing Brenthurst Foundation from South Africa staged what was clearly a regime change conference in Gdansk in Poland. In their declaration, among others, in the conference, that was a conference about what they called against totalitarianism and in defense of democracy, the attendees resolved to call out, I quote, to call out and manage those corporations responsible for manipulating internet and data coverage, close quote. It is therefore conceivable that internet manipulation, mainly United States transnational corporations, which dominate the control of the internet, played a manipulative role as part of the embedded media agenda in our elections. The sponsored attendees from South Africa who took part at the Gdansk conference included some former and current news and opinion pieces editors and former chief representatives and beneficiaries of the apartheid regime. Some were later engaged extensively as preferred political analysts by certain media outlets and broadcasters during our May 2024 elections campaign period and immediately afterwards. This happened not by default, but surely by design. It was therefore a coordinated imperialist agenda. Misinformation and fake news fueled the propaganda that the ANC-led government did nothing for the people over the last 30 years of our democratic dispensation. Media manipulation offered this propaganda an uncritical reception, showering it with extensive coverage. All of a sudden, the hard-won transition from the racist system of colonialism and apartheid, the human rights that the transition ushered in, and the commendable social advances realized by millions of our people were disregarded as, again I quote, nothing that the ANC-led government has done for the people in the past 30 years, close quote. Sadly, this found government communication flat-footed, partly as a result of austerity. It was therefore not robust in publicizing the government's own progressive legislative measures and achievements for the people. Not everybody could be fooled by these machinations, however. The political parties that were heavily funded by the domestic white bourgeoisie and foreign-controlled capital from the imperialist collective West, lumped together in the right-wing multi-party charter, later on called the South Africa Charter, the Moonshot Pact, that dismally failed to secure at least half of the valid votes to effect a full-blown counter-revolutionary defeat against the ANC. The multi-party charter was therefore rejected on the ballot by the majority of the electorate. It has since disintegrated. Nevertheless, the support that its parties received in domestic and foreign party political donations, research propaganda, and embedded media coverage did not go down without an impact in our elections, where voter demoralization grew and voter turnout declined. The right-wing neoliberal organizations around which the failed and rejected regime change multi-party charter class project was anchored did not grow. The DA, for instance, declined in real terms, both nationally and in the Western Cape, where it is a provincial governing party, as measured by actual votes. Other parties that were in parliament during the sixth administration from 2029 to 2022, to 2024, also declined, with the exception of a fractional gain by only one party. Others declined to a point where they did not receive a single seat and are therefore out of parliament. Hence, although worrisome and requiring great attention, the ANC is not the only party that declined. Notably, its decline has occurred despite the commendable progress realized by millions of our people since our hard-won transition from apartheid regime to the current democratic dispensation in 1994. The SACP has always warned that democracy is not necessarily a freedom. You work for freedom even through a democratic process. This progress includes, for instance, human, workers, and women's rights, the construction and free allocation of houses to beneficiaries, the expansion of access to education at all levels through initiatives such as the no-fee paying schools policy, the school nutrition program, and the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, which funded over 5 million students. It is a fact that there were also other social advances, including the commendable expansion in household electrification for millions who had been excluded for over a century from 1894 to 1994, as well as expansion of access to water, sanitation, and social security, including social grants and more. One of the key lessons from the outcome of the May 2024 election is that there are other decisive factors in perception that inform voter behavior. For instance, the commendable progress made under the ANC-led government gradually came under pressure from a myriad of countervailing factors. These include neoliberal policy prescripts, corruption and crime, notably corporate capture of the state, industrial-scale looting and destruction of key public infrastructure, such as electricity, water, rail, road and social infrastructure, even schools. Load shedding also played a negative role. All this undermined the capacity of the state to serve the people diligently. Neoliberal restructuring, corruption and deliberate mismanagement, including what appeared to be internally coordinated sabotage in public entities, forced one public entity after another into financial and operational crisis. Some public entities were pushed to the brink of collapse, while others, such as South African Airways and South African Post Office, virtually collapsed and were placed into business rescue. In the middle of the election campaign, the SA Post Office, for instance, acting no differently from capitalist bosses in the mining and other sectors, embarked on retrenchments, affecting thousands of workers. The South African Post Office, under the direction of the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, took its cue from what happened earlier at SAA under the direction of the Department of Public Enterprises. Also, South Africa is not a war zone, but there are just so many communities in which gunshots cause sleepless nights. Armed criminals seem to be in charge, unabated, with state capacity to fight crime absent on the spot when all this happens. There are just too many families in these communities who live in fear, insecurity, and helplessness. This is part of the conditions under which the May 2024 elections took place. The combined negative impact of neoliberalism and corruption, notably including austerity and corporate capture of the state, on the material condition and perception of millions of people, contributed to sustaining and, in other cases, worsening capitalist-created problems inherited from the colonial and apartheid era, such as unemployment, poverty, and class inequality. Unemployment shot up to crisis rate levels above 20% annual minimum, as defined by the official rate, including discouraged work seekers. In 1996, the same year in which the government adopted the neoliberal economic policy called GEAR, Growth, Employment and Redistribution, as cast in stone and non-negotiable, as it worsened over the years, the official unemployment rate reached 32.9% in the first quarter of 2024, affecting 8.2 million active work seekers. Total unemployment defined by the expanded rate, which includes discouraged work seekers, reached 41.9% in the same quarter, affecting 12.1 million active and discouraged work seekers. While South Africa registered progress in reducing the poverty rate from 71.1% in 1993 to 60.9% in 2010 and further to 55.5% in 2020, at this level, poverty remained a crisis, still affecting too many people. Inequality continued, also at crisis high rates. The top 1% of earners took home almost 20% of the income, and the top 10% took home 65%, according to a 2022 study by the World Bank. This means that 90% of South Africans earners took home only 35% of the total income. The impact of unemployment, poverty, and inequality still reflected the persisting racialized, gendered, and spatialized uneven capitalist development legacy of the colonial and apartheid era, with black people the worst affected. Within this population reality, women are the majority, according to statistics from StatSA. Similarly, the World Bank study underlined that white people remained more likely to find work, and work that pays better than black people. As the May 2024 election results show, the DA and the Freedom Front Plus still constantly win votes in predominantly white voting districts, with the DA between the two being the most favored beneficiary of this racial identity politics. But back to the study that we just cited, female workers, with black females the worst affected, and about 30% less than male workers. Urban workers earned about twice as much as those in the countryside. South Africa was the worst of the top 10 countries with the highest wealth inequality. In addition, Neoliberal attacks on collective bargaining, both in the public and private sectors, negatively impacted the working class. At SABC, an unresolved collective bargaining dispute continued, undermining workers, with management reacting negatively towards the progressive trade union movement.
All right, so there you have it. Live visuals there coming from Johannesburg. Mapaila, the Secretary General of the SACP, giving their own assessment around why the current composition of cabinet is the way it is. They've put it down to a whole range of issues, including some kind of coordinated attempt by the Brandhurst Foundation and others to drive a particular narrative around how the ANC has performed in the past 30 years.